The Southern Poverty Law Center says U.S. hate groups saw their influence in government, quote, balloon over the last 4 years. The center released findings from its annual Year in Hate and Extremism report Monday. The group tracked 838 active hate groups across the country. Despite an 11% drop in the number of groups in 2020, they say the decline should, quote, not be interpreted as reduction in bigoted belief and actions. The report notes violent political activity reached historic highs, identifying nearly 600 anti-government groups, including 169 militia groups. CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Sganga has been following this story, and she joins me now from Washington. Hi there, Nicole. So what trends did the report cite among hate groups in the U.S.?
Well, Elaine, you gave the top line right there, which is that the number of hate groups is in decline, but the levels of hate and bigotry in the United States has not diminished. In fact, as people have been driven inside by the coronavirus pandemic, much of this extremist activity has migrated to online networks and social media. The Southern Poverty Law Center said it identified 838 active hate groups operating across the United States in 2020. They also put out a survey that was conducted back in August of 2020. 29% of respondents there said they personally know someone who believes that white people are of the superior race. So again, tracking these white nationalist groups. The SPLC also says that far right is no longer a collection of groups so much as it is a widespread social movement converged around this idea that mainstream political channels and democracy itself will not allow members to achieve their own political goals. That's much of what we saw as the January 6th events played out at the United States Capitol. In addition, the coronavirus pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the 2020 election cycle, of course, instigated some of this activity, according to the SPLC. Separately, in 2020, the SPLC did identify 566 anti-government groups. You mentioned it earlier. That includes 169 militia groups. And the SPLC says that veterans with specialized trainings and increased violent capacity have been embraced by many of these militia groups who benefit from recruiting these individuals because of their specialized skills and passing techniques on to others. We should note that currently the Pentagon does not ban troops from participating in some of these anti-government militias nor screen for them, but their internal watchdog announced earlier this month that the DoD, the Department of Defense, will be investigating whether it has adequate procedures in place to prevent white supremacists and other extremists from joining and remaining in the military.
You know, Nicole, the pandemic has really altered so many things in our society, including, as I understand it, hate groups. What is the correlation between technological advancement and the reach of extremist groups?
Well, Elaine, one thing we're seeing is that as more and more people are quarantining inside, much of this activity has migrated online. And that also extends to fundraising, believe it or not. One thing that federal authorities are looking into now surrounding the January 6 riots is how were some of these things funded? In the same way, the SPLC has looked into some of these 838 hate groups to see, how are individuals and groups collecting money? Now, in the past, a lot of this was through membership fees, through paraphernalia sales. That is still the case, but another tool that is being used is sort of this monetized propaganda. What used to be books and manifestos is now being replaced by live streaming, believe it or not, which is being used as this popular tool to spread far-right ideology. So I'll give you an example. There's a popular video live streaming service called DLive, and it was used to raise nearly $900,000 for far-right extremist video streamers last year. In fact, the SPLC tracked fundraising online through this platform from April of 2020 to January of this year and found that 119 accounts associated with some of these far-right groups and fringe ideologies earned the equivalent of $851,000 in game currency, much of which was cashed out into real dollars. Now, some of these funds were frozen when certain accounts were deleted by DLive after the January 6th riots. But this is going to be a continuing challenge for some of these social media and streaming platforms, not only deleting the accounts, but also stopping and curbing the spread of fundraising among some of these groups and individuals.
Really eye-opening to hear those details, Nicole. In the wake of this, is the Southern Poverty Law Center making any recommendations based on the findings? And is there a history of these kinds of recommendations turning into action?
Well, certainly we've not seen too much action occur over the past 4 years, but of course there are policy recommendations, and the Southern Poverty Law Center says that it has been heartened so far by what it's seen and heard from the Biden administration. So one of these policy recommendations is to enact what's known as the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. That's something that passed the House last year but never made its way to the Senate, and this would establish offices within the Department of Homeland Security, within the Department of Justice, and within the FBI that would monitor, investigate, and prosecute cases of domestic terrorism and be required to report some of their findings and their progress to Congress regularly. In addition to that, the SPLC is recommending improvements to federal hate crime data collection, training, and prevention. So, for example, the FBI's annual Hate Crime Statistics Act report is known as the best national snapshot of hate violence in America, but its data that's received from the 18,000 federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies is vastly underreported, in part because it's not mandatory. So, for example, in 2019, 86% of police agencies either affirmatively reported that they had zero hate crimes or they did not report any data at all to the FBI. So, again, trying to improve some of the hate crime data collection in this country will also be pivotal in trying to reverse some of these trends.
Nicole, thank you.
Thank you.